In this video, we'll explore solving a system of 3 equations and 3 unknowns using a process called row-reduced echelon form. And I'll illustrate how to use the TI 83 or 84 calculator to help us do this. Here's the system we'd like to solve. 3 equations and 3 unknowns. What I've done is I've formed what is called an augmented matrix. I've put the coefficients of x in the first column, the coefficients of y in the second, the coefficients of z in the third column, and then I've separated those coefficients with a line, and in the last column, column 4, I have put the constants. The numbers along the diagonal are called pivot elements. Our goal is to make these pivot elements equal to 1. We're going to accomplish this by multiplying a row through by the reciprocal of that pivot element. So here is our goal. We would like to transform the original augmented matrix into a matrix that has 1s along the diagonals and 0s off the diagonals. This process is called either Gauss-Jordan elimination or putting a matrix in row-reduced echelon form. So here is our original augmented matrix. I need to put a 1 in this position. So a row operation that would accomplish that is to simply swap rows 1 and 2. So the next matrix is the original augmented matrix with rows 1 and 2 swapped. We now have accomplished putting the pivot element in the first location in column 1. Now we need to proceed with column 1 to make both the 2 and the 5 into a 0. First we'll work on the 2. We'll try to make the 2 a 0 by adding a multiple of the pivot row to row 2. But before we do that, let's look at some mechanics on our calculator. I have a matrix button on my calculator. Other students might find that their matrix operation is above the x inverse, and you'd have to use a second function to get to it. So let's hit our matrix button. We want to put our data entries into matrix A, so we're going to cursor over and select Edit and then Enter. Our matrix is a 3 by 4 matrix, 3 rows, 4 columns. So I'm going to type 3 and then Enter, and then 4 and then Enter. And now I've created a 3 by 4 matrix. What I'm going to do is simply type the entries of my original augmented matrix. 2, Enter, -3, Enter, 4, Enter, -15, Enter. Now moves me to row 2. 1, Enter, -1, Enter, 1, Enter, -4, Enter. Now moves me to row 3. 5, Enter, 1, Enter, -2, Enter, and 12, Enter. Now to accomplish the row operation of swapping rows 1 and 2, I'm going to quit. I'm going to get back into my matrix menu, and this time I'm going over to Math. The operation I want is at the bottom of this menu, so I'm going to hit up arrow, and I'm going to pick option C, which is row swap, and press Enter. I have to identify the matrix that I want to do the swapping in. So I'm going to hit my matrix button and pick matrix A. Then I'm going to put a comma, and then a 1 and a comma and a 2 and a closed parentheses. So that command is in matrix A, swap rows 1 and 2, and I'm going to press enter. And you can see that the rows have been swapped. Now this is really important. I want to store that result into matrix A and press enter. So now matrix A has been updated and rows 1 and 2 have been swapped. The next thing I want to accomplish is I want to make this 2 into a 0. So I'm going to be changing row 2 by adding a multiple of another row to row 2. And the row I'm going to be using is the row that contains the pivot element. Because if I were to multiply 1 by -2 and then add it to row 2, I would get a 0 in that position. So this is the row operation. Change row 2 by adding to row 2, -2 times row 1. We can get our calculator to do that. We're going to go to Matrix, and we're going to go over to Math, and we're going to go up, and we're going to pick option F, which is multiply a row by a constant and add it to another row. So the row operation works like this. We're going to type in -2 because that's the constant we're multiplying. We're going to hit a comma, and we're going to pick matrix to indicate we're operating on matrix A, and then we're going to go comma, and then we're going to mention the two rows. Row 1 is the one that's being multiplied by the constant, and we're replacing row 2. Close the parentheses, press enter. So this operation has been accomplished. You can see your result on the screen and on my PowerPoint. Once we verify that we have a 0, we're going to store our matrix into matrix A and update that. The next element that needs to be changed is the 5. The 5 needs to be made into a 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to change row 3 by adding to row 3 a multiple of our pivot row. It's pretty clear that you need to add a -5 to 5 in order to get a 0. So our row operation is -5, row 1, add it to row 3. Let's do that on our calculator. We've got matrix, and we've got math, and we've got up arrow. Pick option F. Now the constant multiplier is a -5. We're operating on matrix A, and it's row number 1 that's being multiplied by the constant, and it's row 3 that's being replaced. Press enter. So you see your new matrix both on the screen and on my PowerPoint. I want to store that into matrix A, and now matrix A has been updated. So once we've completed pivoting on column 1, and when I say pivoting on column 1, I mean accomplishing the 1, 0, 0 in column 1, we need to begin pivoting on column 2. You always create in a given column your pivot element first. So it's -1 that needs to be changed. It's the pivot element. It needs to be changed to a 1. So you create pivot elements by multiplying a row through by a constant. Clearly multiplying row 2 by -1 would create a 1 in that second position. On the calculator, you're going to go to matrix, over to math, you're going to go up arrow, and now we're going to pick option E, which is multiply a row by a constant. We're going to specify the constant multiplier, which is -1, the comma, and then we're going to go to matrix and pick A, and then comma, and then tell it which row, row 2. So you can see that we have a new matrix with a 1 in that pivot position. We're going to store that into matrix A, and matrix A has been updated. Our next task in column 2 will be to create our zeros. So our next task is going to be create a 0 where there is currently a -1. So we need to change row 1. Once again, we change row 1 by adding a multiple of the pivot row to it. But since the element in row 1 is -1, all we need to do is add 1 times row 2 to it, and that will create a 0. So on our calculator, we've got matrix, and we've got math, and we've got up arrow and F, and we're multiplying row 2 by simply a 1, and then the matrix is matrix A, and the 2 rows in question are row 2 is being multiplied by 1, and then we're adding it to row 1, and there's our updated matrix that has a 0 in that position. Store it into matrix A. Moving along, the 6 now needs to be made into a 0. So we're going to change row 3 by adding a multiple of another row to row 3, namely the row that has the pivot, which is row 2. Clearly we need to multiply row 2 by -6 to create a 0. So we've got matrix, and we've got math, and we've got up arrow, row multiply. The constant multiplier is -6. We're operating on matrix A. And the 2 rows in question are rows 2 and row 3. Let's see what I did there. Let's see, -6. Let's see if I back up here a bit. I put a decimal instead of a comma. So let's change that to a comma, and that should be okay. We have our 0 in the 3rd row, which is good. We want to store that into matrix A. And then our next job is to create a 5 in this pivot position because we're finished with column 2. Column 2, the pivoting is completed. We move to the 3rd column. We're going to create our pivot element first. So we're going to make this 5 into a 1 by multiplying by the reciprocal of 5, or 1/5. So we're going to go into math and multiply a row. We're going to multiply, the constant multiplier is 1/5, comma, and then the matrix is matrix A, comma, and the row that we're multiplying is row 3, close the parentheses, and there it is, there's our 1. We're going to store it into matrix A. We need to create a 0 in this location that currently has a -1. So we're going to change row 1 by adding a multiple of our pivot row. Since 1 and -1 are 0, simply adding 1 times row 3 should do the job. So we're going to go into matrix and math and pick multiply a row plus add. And our constant multiplier is 1. Our matrix is matrix A. We're multiplying row 3 by 1 and adding it to row 1, and that should complete our command. And we have created our 0. We're going to store this into matrix A. And finally, we need to create a 0 in this position that now has a -2. So the row operation would be to take the third row that has the pivot element, multiply it by 2, and add it to row 2, and that'll change row 2. So we've got matrix, we go over to math, we go up arrow, and we're going to pick the last option. We're going to go 2 and then a comma, and then matrix A, and then another comma. Mention the rows 3, 2, close our parentheses, enter, and there we have our matrix in row reduced echelon form, and we can read off the answers. X is 1, Y is 3, Z is 2.